Inputting webinar ID 160-439-9420 #. Chair.
All right. I see that you're settled in. I think District 9 is bringing this forward, so I don't know who wants to kick this off.
Thank you, Council President. I'll make some brief introductory comments and then hand it over to Rosa for her presentation. People do not trust that their government is working on their behalf. There is a general level of disgust with the influence of money in politics, and Americans, Californians, and San Diegans aren't wrong to feel that. When moves through our elections and the public can't see where it came from, people are left to assume the worst. Back in June, this committee voted unanimously to begin doing something about that. That vote wasn't the end of the work, it was just the beginning. This item is phase 2. It applies specifically to campaign finance, and it's meant to close the loopholes that still let big money shape our elections from the dark. And with that, I will hand it over to Rosa for her presentation.
Good morning, Chair LaCava and members of the Rules Committee. My name is Rosa Lasquaga, Deputy Chief of Staff, and I will need 8 minutes. On behalf of the Council Member Hila Rivera, I'm here to present on the second part of the Comprehensive Campaign Finance and Ethics Reform Package for the City of San Diego, focused on exposing dark money, banning shadow campaigns, and ending perpetual ongoing fundraising. Before I walk through the specifics, I want to ground us in why we brought this action to rules. Our vision is simple: a San Diego that works for all San Diegans, not just the wealthy and powerful. And the goal of this ordinance is to rebuild trust by bringing real transparency to the money being spent to influence elections, disclose spending that promotes future candidates, and align fundraising timelines for all candidates. What we're seeing in San Diego and in campaigns is outside groups can spend unlimited money promoting a future candidate before that person ever files a candidate intention statement, and none of that spending prior to that form being filed has to be disclosed. That creates what we call a shadow campaign. Voters see extensive candidate style promotion with no timely information about who paid for it, who funded it, and how much was spent. A candidate's wealthy allies can build their name recognition for them long before any disclosure obligation kicks in. Existing disclosure requirements have not kept pace with modern campaign strategies. Oh, sorry, that was early. Leaving key gaps that undercut true transparency. And campaign face different fundraising time periods depending on whether they're running on an even or odd number district. There's no coordinated timeline that aligns those fundraising periods with candidacy filing deadlines, which leaves an uneven playing field. These loopholes are being used right now in San Diego and real elections. Here's an example of a shadow campaign mailer that was sent to residents and voters here. Voters have received a mail from a political action committee or nonprofit featuring a full-page photograph of an individual, a personal signature, a first-person statement of the individual's qualification for public office, along with QR codes collecting residents' contact information and policy preferences. The mailer carried no financial campaign finance disclosures because the individual featured at the time had not filed a candidate intention statement. The same gap exists once politicians are also elected. Well-funded interest groups can spend heavily on advertising that praises or attacks a city elected official to thank them for a vote, promote their record, or criticize their position with no obligation to disclose who is funding it. On multiple occasions, these deep-pocketed groups have spent money to send mailers, text messages to San Diegans, applauding elected officials for taking positions immediately after a vote. Statewide organizations funded by small number of donors are already running this kind of advertising about California elected officials, including San Diego. When it paid for by line that names a vaguely named organization and reveals nothing about who actually funded it. This ordinance proposes 3 targeted campaign finance reforms: shadow campaign and pre-candidacy disclosure, true source and top funder campaign financial disclosure, and aligning campaign finance and fundraising timelines. Establish shadow campaign disclosures. This reform establishes a look-back period tied to the campaign cycle for the office being sought. Spending on candidate style promotion during the window no longer sits outside disclosure just because the Form 501 hasn't been filed yet. A paid communication is covered if it clearly identifies and promotes and features, otherwise references someone who is later filing a candidate intention statement and is estimated during the look back period and is a candidate like enough to build public recognition of that person as a prospective candidate. Once the individual files their candidate intention statement, the candidate or whoever was responsible for that covered communication must disclose the financial activity tied to those communications during the applicable look back period. The same disclosure triggers applies to city elected officials. Paid communication that identifies a sitting official and references their performance in office, a position they've taken, or a municipal decision will also trigger disclosure, closing the gap that currently lets outside groups praise or attack officials anonymously, whether that spending happens before someone declares candidacy or after they're in office. City campaign systems already require disclosure for contributions and expenditures, including what's spent on vendors and consultants, but it doesn't require disclosure on the true original source of that money. Contributions can pass through one or more entities, which obscures who actually funded a campaign or a communication. Voters see the pass-through name, they don't see the source. Similar to follow the money proposal, this side captures the heart of the disclosure reforms, requiring to disclose the true source in campaign spending. Proposed changes will require top 5 funder disclosure on all San Diegans. And lastly, proposed changes will require a copy of all public communication be filed with the clerk. These changes mean the public is left with the real picture of the influence behind the campaign that's influencing them. Under this proposal, any Los Angeles already requires a copy of all public communication be filed with the elected Ethics Commission, creating a searchable public archive to influence campaign materials. We're proposing the same for San Diego to be filed with the city clerk. Today's fundraising windows open at the beginning of the year before an election and stay open well after. Right now, the city timeline also isn't equal, depending on whether a candidate is running in a March or June primary. The length of the time they've allowed to raise and spend funds is different. This proposal aligns those windows so every candidate has the same length of time to raise and spend regardless of primary date. The amendment establishes one consistent starting line, exactly 1 year before the election for every candidate. The period for raising and spending campaign funds begins at the same point for everyone, aligned with the disclosure periods for the applicable primary. That's consistency is what creates a structured campaign timeline rather than the current patchwork of different races. The proposal here is straightforward. Shorten the season, perpetual fundraising, keep the focus on governing, and make sure campaigns are won by public support, not by who started dialing for dollars. The request action for the item is as follows. Request that the Council District 9 office work with the City Attorney's Office to draft an ordinance and amend San Diego's municipal code to update outdated campaign finance related to shadow campaigns, pre-candidacy disclosures, and true source and top funder campaign finance disclosures, and align campaign finance and fundraising timelines. Thank you for your time, and I'm here to answer any questions.
All right, thank you for your work and thank you for the presentation this morning. With that, Sarah, please proceed with public comment.
Thank you, Chair LaCava. No organized presentations were submitted for this item, so we'll move to in-person public testimony. Each speaker will have 1 minute. We've received 4 slips here in the committee room. We will begin testimony with Joyce and Yada. You will be followed by allegedly Audra, Amanda, and Manny Rodriguez.
I am in opposition of this. Committee member Elo Rivera, I admire your work for the people. Yet on this item, I'll say this from my heart, and I'll start with a quote. better angels of our nature would rise up and preserve unity, end of quote. This is part of an Abraham Lincoln quote from his first inaugural address, 1861. I hope I have 2 minutes. Here's my glitch. Here's what I'm against: division. Feel into the vision. Don't just use your mind, but go into your better angel's place for all of San Diego. Councilmember Ilovera, you say this. Said it?
Thank you. That does conclude your time.
Thank you. Love
Thank
to
you.
all.
Our next speaker is allegedly Audra.
You guys are funny. Because the whole system is fraudulent. And it's about racketeering and mismanaging people's money, coming back to us for more. And this is how you wield your power if you don't like what someone's doing. But I mean, it's going to continue. And what happens if somebody doesn't disclose this? Do you make a report and then they investigate the person? I mean, how is there going to be enforced? You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, it happens right now. I mean, all the time. I mean, so that's why, there's nobody to stop the fraud because you guys are all engaged in it. And that's why you pick the people that you do in whatever commission or committee or board so that the racket can continue. It's organized crime. So it's just, it's funny to sit and witness it. And see how you guys are like, we hate these billionaires and you only, hate some, but it's like you're in bed with others. It's just funny.
Thank you. Amanda?
Good morning, Amanda, District 7. On the surface, looks good. I like it. Look forward to reading the actual ordinance. Great presentation. Love to see Richard Bailey getting called out. He's a total lying greaseball scumbag. I looked on the OCPF website, it excluded flyers and door hangers. I would include that. I think that we can fit that information. If it can fit on a mailer, it can fit on flyers and door hangers. And to kind of echo Audra, presentation didn't mention what consequences will be for violating. Hopefully ordinance will have some actual teeth in it. So we're not just doing performative politics up here as usual. Thanks.
Thank you. And our final speaker here in the committee room is Manny Rodriguez.
Good morning, council members. My name is Manny. Y'all know me. I'm here in my personal capacity, but I do manage a political action committee and I'm working to create new ones. And I do want to chime in and just say that I support these initiatives to bring more transparency in spending and have folks like myself get money and move money around. I do have some questions before I urge you all to vote yes on this. I do have a question on the timeline for disclosing the top 5 sponsors or funders. I think it's a great idea. But the top 5 can look different if you're looking at it historically versus who's been funding it in the past year or two. So I would ask you all to think about what do you want to look historically in the history of that committee or in the past year or two. Also for the public comms, what would that include? If my committee makes an Instagram post announcing that we have a general meeting, do I have to disclose the top 5 funders on that Instagram post? What is the threshold for what counts as a public communications post? That Instagram post, yeah, it was public, but it was meant to our members, right? So just kind of think about some more of the nuances. And yeah, I have some more thoughts, but please vote yes.
Thank you. This concludes testimony here in the committee room. So I'll begin the 5-minute timer for all those in the virtual queue to indicate if they wish to provide comment on item number 4. Each speaker will have 1 minute. We currently have 2 hands raised and we will begin with Blair Beekman. Please unmute and begin.
Hi, thank you. Blair Beekman. I previously meant to use the word foster instead of foister in talking about what was just the Ethics Commission, and I thought it was all of the commissions. Sorry about that. For this item to try my best on, I think this is one of these items that it's joyful to be a part of the public process, hopefully. It is a good step-by-step process this can be doing to address our future, to be more accountable, to practice good governance. It's really nice to hear this. Thank you. These are the sort of items, it's a step-by-step process to eventually address Citizens United. I hope this item can address PACs overall. There'll be ongoing PAC issues that I think are uncomfortable, that our politicians can make choices to avoid large anonymous PACs that do things that can really hurt a campaign on a person and work towards specific PACs. And I hope we can talk more about that in the future as well. Thanks a lot for this item.
Thank you for your testimony. Victoria Labruzzo, please unmute and begin. You will have 1 minute.
Thank you. I'm just going to comment on the presentation. I understand why the Bailey mailer was used as an example, but it was distributed because it was distributed before he formally became a candidate. But Mr. Bailey is now an active candidate for city council, and I really question whether an official city presentation should identify a current candidate's political material as an example of conduct that you're trying to curb. The same point could have been made without identifying the information, and it could have been redacted. So I just wanted to express my disappointment in the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Judy Strang. Please unmute and begin.
Good morning. When I read through the material last night in preparation today, I wasn't actually planning to speak to it because I understood what Sean Elo Rivera probably wanted to get to. It's not going to happen. I think it was a worthy effort, and I think the motives behind it are good, but there are so many ways to get around campaigning before they've actually declared the candidacy. I do appreciate that of the 3 areas you are concerned about, the ending of perpetual fundraising, I think, is applauded by all of us, because we feel sometimes that city council people, when they're talking about their intentions, are a year before they're going to rerun for their position, or just letting us know when we'd be lucky to have them again. And I realize that's more about chatter than money, and you're trying to get at money. It's a worthy effort. I don't think you're going to get to it. It doesn't handle social media.
Thank you for your testimony. And Chair, with no other hands in the queue, this concludes comment on item 4.
All right, thank you, Sarah. And with that, we'll go back to Councilmember Elo Rivera.
All right. Thank you, Council President. Let me start by thanking Rosa for her work on this. Rosa, I don't know if there's any question that was raised by the public. Maybe enforcement might be one good thing to speak about before I dive into my comments.
Yeah, for enforcement, we're working with the Ethics Commission to see if we can incorporate these, and also in the clerk with the campaign requirements that folks get and like the manuals that they received. It's honestly putting in the rules and then hopefully enforcing it through creating existing mechanisms that we have in the city.
Thank you, Rosa. And thanks again for the work on this. I also want to thank the clerk and Ethics Commission for being so good about responding to questions we've had, not just on this particular proposal, but the entire package of campaign finance and ethics reforms that we were working on. Every one of the gaps that was outlined in the presentation benefits the same people, those with the most money and the most sophistication to work around current disclosure rules. It leaves everyday San Diegans, the people we're actually supposed to be accountable to, without the information they need to know who's really behind the campaigns and communications in front of them. Support, not by whoever done the most while staying the most hidden. This item closes light and covers the flip side, where well-financed interests can reward office holders who vote their way by promoting them and punish those who stand up to them by tearing them down, never cease. Under our rules today, it's not neither of those things are lobbying or campaigning. It's a blind spot in our rules, and it's being exploited. Second, it would require disclosure of the true source of campaign money, not just the last organization that passed it along. And third, it ends the reality that there's practically no stretch of time here in San Diego when when elected officials aren't raising money. That's time that could and should be going to working on housing, public safety, the daily work of running the city. And the concerns that are being raised here aren't theoretical. As we saw in the presentation, San Diegans have already received mail featuring a person's photograph, their signature, a first-person case for why they're qualified for public office, with no campaign finance disclosure of any kind. For all we know, Elon Musk could have spent $10 million supporting a candidate before they declared for their candidacy, and we will never know where that money came from or how much was spent. That is a blatant skirting of the spirit of our rules, and this effort would close that loophole. We believe that these are straightforward and common sense reforms. It doesn't tell anyone what they can or can't say. It just makes sure that when money is talking in our elections, San Diegans know where that money is coming from. And I am proud to be putting this forward and would ask for your support in continuing this work. With that, Council President, I will move approval of the proposal.
All right, we have a motion by Councilmember Elo Rivera to move the recommendation. I'm not seeing anybody in the light, so I'll make a couple of comments here. I've always admired the district, and I've never been afraid of big ideas. I think the cause is certainly very noble, but I think there's a lot of nuance that people are going to need to puzzle out. To some of the comments by the public, money is the only measure that we use to assess disclosure. And so that's what we measure. And that's why disclosure of who is contributing when they're contributing can be a very important element. And despite some of the comments on the prior item and this item, I think the Ethics Commission actually has a pretty good track record of doing its work, enforcing the rules that are on the books. And if you flip through the media over the years, you'll see people that have been caught and have been punished through fines. And there's been a lot of talk, those fines were not substantial enough to actually discourage that kind of behavior. And maybe that's a conversation for another day. But there's also, I think, a lot of nuance between something as silly as I print a mailer today and I disclose the top 5. How often do I have to reprint that mailer because the top 5 change? You know, those kind of nuances is what drives everybody crazy in trying to figure that out. I have a lot of confidence that you and your team can actually puzzle that out and that you will take a lot of input about how to do that. I think there's also what was not raised or maybe implied in some of the public comment is when does it cross that line, especially for somebody who is currently in office and is trying to advance issues as part of their daily work that some say, no, you're not doing that as part of your work. You're doing that because you're running for re-election or another office. And how do we distinguish that? So I think the nuances in getting that right so that the integrity of what you're trying to do is actually maintained and not undercut because of 1,000 little cuts in there. So to that point, I would be willing to do this if this ordinance, a draft ordinance, was brought back to committee, because I think these things we can puzzle out here at the committee level that can be difficult to puzzle out at the full council. So if you would agree that for sure draft. Okay, so with that and your good work in trying to puzzle out all those nuances, I will support the motion.
Thank you, Council President. May I ask just a couple quick things to fill in some details? 2 of the rules that are critical to what's being put forward here, the top 5 disclosure as an example, we're modeling that off of rules from other jurisdictions that have had these rules on the books now, and so we'll be looking to them so it's not totally novel.
Yeah.
The top 5 piece in particular, that is a policy that comes from Rhode Island, and has withstood legal scrutiny. There were significant challenges made against that by some very powerful corporate interest. It made its way through the federal court system, and it is good law. So we're confident in that, and similar with the true source disclosure component. So absolutely, those are really, really important details. I also want to clarify the nuance that you were speaking to about current office holders talking about their work. It's one thing for us to talk about our work. I think what we're trying to aim at is outside sources talking about, not just talking about, but spending on whether or not we are doing what they want or not, and how that money is spent. And there, obviously, the thresholds there are important as well. Absolutely, the details are very, very important here. We want this to be enforceable. I think the general sentiment, and it's baked into the response to, even as you're putting forward proposals, there's like the simultaneous, yes, the rules need to be stricter, and we don't trust the system to enforce them, which makes it even more important for the details to be hammered out. So again, absolutely happy to bring it back here to rules. I do think that it's important that this moves quickly, because the longer we are watching behavior modify on the fly, and some very, very wealthy interests figure out some very creative ways to exploit the loopholes that currently exist. And again, that is playing itself out in real time here in San Diego. And so we want to act methodically and be very thoughtful about what we craft, and we don't want to leave the current rules on the books any longer than they need to be there, because they're being exploited as we speak.
All right, thank you for that. Council President Pro Tem Lee.
Thank you, Council President, and I'll support the motion with the adjustment that you presented, Council President. And I actually really appreciate that, because I was struggling to find the words as well, because I do think there are the nuances here that are going to be critical. And we heard even just some questions from the public. I do think these are issues that are important to address. We saw some of this in play, as Councilmember Rivera pointed out, in this last cycle, and so that is important. But I don't want to just think that we're going to model after some jurisdiction out there and that is sufficient for what's in place in San Diego, because for us, how we align with what the FPPC puts forward, I think is important. And then how that connects to enforcement, especially through ethics, also all of that connects somewhere. And so getting that hammered out, I think, would be helpful, and look forward to seeing what comes back.
All right, thank you for that. Councilmember Campillo.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Councilmember Elo Rivera. Happy to support moving forward at this point to get more details fleshed out. I was curious, just real quick, Councilmember Elo Rivera, slide 5 showed the shadow campaigning for, or it's titled Shadow Campaigning for Office Holders. It had 2 examples of state level and federal level. Would the rules you're proposing apply to people, rather so-called shadow campaign for people who file a 501 to run for city office, or for any office that was required under FPPC rules in California?
I think we'd only have jurisdiction over those here in the city.
Got it.
Those are kind of live examples that we wanted to give people something tangible to see in terms of what we're referencing. But I don't think we could require someone who's running for statewide or federal office. That being said, there's, I think, 2 ends of the disclosure there. There's a disclosure by those who are spending, and then the disclosure by the person who's seeking office. And so that first component of the shadow campaigning piece, the city council candidate who's had a de facto campaign run for them prior to filing, they have to disclose upon their filing to run for office about running for office here in San Diego, about the expenditures that were made on their behalf.
That begs a question. In this particular slide 4, on commongoodsd.com, it's clear that the then not candidate, then future candidate has a signature on it, and it seems to be coming from him as a letter, right? it seems that if that wasn't part of it and it was completely a potential candidate X who hasn't filed, that seems to be an independent expenditure. And so we'd have to get to the details of that candidate filing a 501 and not coordinating with an outside group. How are they supposed to disclose when they're supposed to have an independent expenditure firewall? So that would be first thing. And that would be easily manipulable because they would simply just change the format of their advertising so that it is independent. And so nothing gets necessarily stopped there. On the IE side or outside PAC group side, then they still have to disclose today what they're spending on in regular filings on their semi-annual reports. So I'm not sure what would be necessarily different by passing the rule as currently conceptualized. I see what we're trying to aim for, but the disclosure rules at the moment certainly say that. Is it your vision that when a candidate files a 501, if an outside PAC has spent any money that includes a photo or a positive message or a website that makes a person look good before they become a candidate, they'd have to disclose that they spent money trying to make that person look good?
Yeah, I think the idea here is that we don't allow for the circumvention of those coordination rules. Because as we just saw there was a campaign run to promote the candidate, and we don't know what was spent on that, what the source of that money is.
Can I ask you this? Was the reason we don't know that is because it doesn't use electioneering? It's technically not an electioneering communication that doesn't say vote for, support, draft, this, that, and the other, or oppose, stop, vote no on.
I think it's a combination of things of that plus this was not a declared candidate.
Yeah.
So that, because it was not a declared candidate, the rules look different. And I think that's the thing that we're trying to close, where we are incentivizing someone to not actually file that they're running for office because of the coordination that can occur prior to that, the promotion that can be done without any of the rules that we currently have in place. So essentially moving that shadow campaign into the light, because I don't think this is the last time we will see this game played.
Sure, I hear you. I wonder if the city attorney really needs to analyze at what point state law around what qualifies as electioneering communications applies to something that is fundamentally a marketing campaign that ultimately rolls into a electoral campaign. But I think that would be a really important thing to understand so that the applicability of a potential rule is obvious for everyone to understand. The second thing I wanted to ask really quickly about is the fundraising timeline period. I know that right now we have rules that say city council, at least certainly elected officials, cannot raise money for anything 180 days after their election and until January 1st of the year before their potential reelect. So it seems like there's still about 18 months where city council candidates, the mayor for reelection, city attorney for reelection, can't raise money and are prohibited from actually doing so. Is the purpose of the fundraising time period update simply to make sure it's 365 days before a primary election is held? Or because it says in the first bullet point on slide 11 says there's practically no period of time when San Diego's elected officials and candidates are not raising money. You and I and the council president, basically from May or June of 2021, could not raise any money for a potential reelection until January 1st of 2023. So there's definitely guardrails there. Just wondering what the key point is here.
Yeah, so good question. The first piece on the window, so yes, for an individual, right? I think what we're talking about kind of is globally, that cycle is constantly running within the city. So when you put together the odd districts and the even districts, at that point, it's perpetually rolling.
I see.
But the alignment piece on the 365 days, as envisioned, this was a flag from the clerk that there's this unevenness between cycles. And there would be some benefits from her perspective in having it be a clear line that starts exactly 1 year prior to the primary. We also think that that would be useful, as those of us on this dais know and others know. One of the ways that folks are deemed viable for office in the future is based on previous fundraising results. And if you happen to be in a cycle where there was a smaller window rather than a longer window, you could be presumed to be a less viable candidate because of no fault of your own. You had 3 months less to raise that first batch of money. So again, there's the kind of global perpetual cycle that we're looking to have some end to, and then evening out the playing field for those who are running in different cycles.
Understood. 2 quick questions. One for the city attorney, or wasn't it previously the rule that a candidate for council could only raise a year before their election day? I feel like that rule was before 2016, 2017, and then was adjusted to January 1st of the prior year before the election in like 2018.
I don't know that offhand. I have to look into it.
Okay. Looking at historical records, I'm sure we could identify that very, very, very quickly. I think you said something interesting, Councilmember Elo Rivera. You said that the political pragmatism of having it 1 year before. You mentioned cycle lengths. Doesn't it seem to suggest that having it start on January 1st, so every candidate has exactly 6 months to raise before their first period, gives everybody the equal time, as opposed to some candidates getting March through June 31st and some getting June 5th through June 31st to raise money? I don't know. You brought up the sort of viability question, and I was wondering why we would, I mean, I don't know that we should be discussing political pragmatism in how we craft laws, but it seems to me that giving everyone 6 months for their first reporting period would be the fair thing. But that's not necessarily a question, but I'm confused why that was brought up. I hear you. I think we should look and see why that was changed. I feel very positive it was changed in 2016, 2017, 2018, and just get a historical understanding. Definitely see the virtue of saying 365 days before an election. Everybody knows what that is, but everyone also knows when January 1st is. So I'll be in support today and look forward to the revisions in the city attorney's opinion and further public input. Thank you, council member.
All right, thank you for that. Good conversation. Not seeing anybody else in the lights. We have a motion by Councilmember Elo Rivera and a second by myself to move the recommendation and bring it back to committee. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. All right. Now let's go to what some would argue, certainly from a public point of view, is actually the big item on Rules Committee, although I think the first two that we